Hello everybody, this is Russ Bucher from ControlMyJoystick. In this video we're going to take a look at how we can use a 3D connection controller and voice commands to control the game called Elite Dangerous. And Elite Dangerous is a spaceship flying game, works really well with voice and especially a 6 degree of freedom controller like this SpaceMouse Enterprise that I have here. You can use a Space Navigator or a SpaceMouse Pro as well, but I just happen to have this one set up for a demo. And so we're going to take a look at how we can use it, and we're going to cover things like how to set up profile targets, talk about the different virtual joystick controllers in your system, how to map the controller axis within Elite Dangerous because it's a little bit tricky, and we're going to see what it's like to map joystick buttons, do key mapping, and then eventually we're going to get to a point where we can automatically navigate menus. So for example, when you need to request docking clearance, so for example, when you need to be able to request docking clearance, which normally will require you to navigate several menus and press several different buttons, we're just going to handle that with a voice command instead. And we're going to see how we can also automate menus so that we could press a button and it automatically sets. And we're going to try setting up, and we're going to see how we can configure a button on the controller so that we can press the button and it automatically sets up our navigational points so we can navigate to another planet. And then we'll talk about how we could change axis curves and how we can use this all in the galaxy map as well. So let's get started. What I'd like to do first of all is I'm just going to take off in Elite Dangerous. This will take a couple minutes. I'm just going to take off and turn around and come back in and land, all using the controller. And I just got this new freighter here at Type 7, so don't laugh if I crash it. But let's see how it goes. I'm going to not be speaking for purposes of a tutorial while I fly this for the next couple of minutes because I don't want to activate any voice commands and I don't want to use a voice prefix either. So what I've done is enabled the voice muting feature, and I have this mapped to a button on my controller, and so if I press it, it unmutes the voice. So now if I was to say anything that is mapped as a voice command, it would activate that within the game. So all right, so I'm just going to move ControlMyJoystick out of the way, and let's see if I still remember how to fly this thing. Gear up. So I'm just going to go a little ways and turn around. Now, one of the things that always drove me crazy with Elite Dangerous is every time you have to dock at a station, and you do that a lot, is you have to navigate through a bunch of menus. I hated that, so I made a macro to take care of that. I'm just going to turn around. And I'm going to stop here. And I no longer have the station targeted anymore, so I'm just going to target that. Okay, I'll get a little bit closer before I try to get a landing clearance. Request docking. And you can see there when I did that, it navigated through the menu and requested the docking. So I'm going to try that again here, and it should unrequest it. Request docking. Right, so it's been canceled. I'm going to get it again. Request docking. Okay. I've deactivated my auto docking, so I'll try to manually land this. Driving like a maniac. Thankfully, landing pad 40 is further back. Had a lot of speed coming in there. Okay. Gear down. Go inside. Okay, that little bit of chaotic flying was just a quick demo of taking off and returning using the 3D connection controller and a bit of voice commands. So there's a lot of different things you can do with this, and everybody's configurations can be a little bit different. But let's go through some of the different things that you can do. So first of all, let's talk about that voice muted feature. So there is a command that you can do in the game that will mute the voice. And you just bind that to a button on your controller. So if you go into the input menu, go to voice, there's a place down here to select the mute button, and you just click on set and then press the button and hold it. So I'm holding down this one right here, and then hit OK. And OK, so now anytime you press this button, it toggles it on and off. Now, the reason we have that is that sometimes you don't want to use a prefix, because if you wanted to, you could use computer here. Then every time you spoke a command, you have to say computer gear up or computer gear down. That can get a little annoying sometimes, but it does protect you that if someone walks into your room and you're having a conversation with it and you accidentally say something that might cause a command to be fired within ControlMyJoystick, well, that would be bad. So there's different times that you may want to use a prefix or not. Lately, I've not been using a prefix, and I've just muting the voice when I need to talk to someone. So, okay, so I can click on OK. Now, that doesn't mute your mic at all. So if you're on TeamSpeak or something, you still be able to talk to people. However, it just prevents any voice commands from being activated, even if it recognizes your voice. Okay, so I'm just going to leave that on as I speak here, and let's see what else we have. Now, one thing I've done here is I've set up profile targets, and so if you're for example, if I'm in the game here and I have a macro set up, it's called go inside. I'm just going to try it again here. go inside. And so all that does is just activates a down and an up key and a space key to navigate that menu to get you into this screen. But sometimes, and I have multiple monitors here, I'll be surfing or doing email or doing something, and the focus or the active application is not ControlMyJoystick, and it's not the game if you have it running in windowed mode. So that could be a problem, because if you say your voice command or press a button on the joystick, the control inputs are going to go to your web browser or your email program instead of the game, and that's a bit of a pain. So what we have here, I'm just going to bring back ControlMyJoystick, is if you go to the profiles and you right click on a profile, you can edit a target, and a target is the name of the game you're running. So when you start up ControlMyJoystick, it scans all the different things you're running. And what I'm saying here is I'm going to set my target to Elite Dangerous Client. That's actually the name up in the upper left-hand corner of the windowed screen. So I'll click on OK, and I have enabled targets. So now that means if I have another program up, it is going to switch the focus back to the game. So I'll just demonstrate that here. So this is Device Manager, and you can see I'm clicking around, and this program, this Device Manager, is the active application. So now if I press a button or say a voice command, go inside, ControlMyJoystick actually set the game as the active application and then sent the string of commands that allow you to go into this menu. So watch what happens here if I disable that. So I'll bring back ControlMyJoystick. I'm going to disable that. Have Device Manager, or say I'm working in this window doing whatever. Now if I say go inside, it doesn't do anything. It just sent those commands only to this window. So when you are in a game such as Elite Dangerous, sometimes you're navigating a long distance and you're just waiting and waiting, but you want to surf a little bit. What you can do then is just go ahead and surf on a different monitor, and as soon as you move the controller or press a button or do a voice command, it will transition back to the game automatically and send the commands to the game. Now this is real handy within Elite Dangerous, especially because when you're coming out of hyperspace and you're directly about to crash into a sun, if you're surfing over on another monitor and you're looking over there in a corner of your eye, you see that there's a sun right there. You could just move the controller, and those control inputs are going to go directly to your ship. You don't have to go and click quickly on the Elite Dangerous screen and hope you catch it in time. So it's just a little helper to make things easier. While I have Device Manager up here, let's talk about the virtual controller. So here we have a custom joystick driver, and this is it: the tether script, virtual controller, game controller. Okay, so whenever you have mapped an action to a virtual joystick button, or you move this controller around, all that is actually sent through this virtual game controller. Mouse and keyboard mappings don't go through this at all. And now when we need to map the axis on these controllers, we can have a problem, because there's another one here, and that is when you're using these controllers, they install a keyboard mouse joystick emulator. And here's another game controller, and it's trying to think it's a joystick. So the controller actually sends out joystick commands, but there's no curves and there's very little configuration you can do with it. When you move this controller, this driver is going to emit joystick information before this one. They're both going to emit the information, but this one is going to emit it first. And that is picked up by Elite Dangerous. So if when we go to map an axis here in a moment, and you'll see that if you just press the controller in, say, one of these directions, it's going to pick it up through this, and it'll be wrong. We're going to use a voice command to bind it to this one. And I'll show you how that's done. So let's go back here and let's try mapping a axis. So if I go here and into options and the controls, and let's go to flight rotation. So here's where we are rotating about an axis, and on the controller we can rotate about the Z axis, that'd be yaw. We can go forwards and backwards, that's pitch, side to side, that's roll. And you can see I already have them set up. And let me just demonstrate doing the yaw axis. Here I'm going to do it the wrong way, first of all. Maybe the wrong way to demo this, but let's see how it's done wrongly. So if I double click or click once on the what I want to bind, and then try just rotating it, it just picked that up from the 3D Connection KMJ driver. Okay, that's wrong. So you won't have the advantage of all these nice mappings here, the curves and so on. So it's just not going to work well. So instead, we're going to use a voice command. So if I go under Input, 3DXware, and here's the voice commands that we use. So what I want to do is bind Z-axis. So you can bind it moving in the right direction, left direction, or kind of both directions. And when we speak these commands, it's going to actually send a control input to the left and to the right. And then the game will pick that up and bind it. So bind rotation on Z-axis or Z-axis. So we're going to give this a try. I'm going to unmute it. Click here. Actually, I'm just going to get rid of that mapping. Okay, let's double click. All right, here we're going to speak the command. I'm going to bring up the voice panel here. You see it's going to jump directly ahead and select this command. And you can see the list of commands here too. So we're going to go right here. Bind rotation on Z-axis. Bind rotation on Z-axis. Okay, and there it is. So now that is actually bound to ControlMyJoystick, and all the curves and everything will work. It looks exactly the same as the 3D Connection KMJ driver. So it can be a little bit deceiving. So you have to remember to use the voice commands to bind. All right, so now there's one other thing you have to do with binding. And you know, when you press one of these buttons on the controller, or use a voice command, you can send a mouse click or mouse movement or a keyboard keystroke or a joystick button press or release to the game. In ControlMyJoystick, if you go here down to joystick, you can see that we have some joystick buttons, and you can have a maximum of 128 joystick buttons defined. Not all games will use that many though. I think Elite Dangerous uses about 30. So what you can do is you can bind a button to a joystick button. So I could press this button here on the controller keypad and have that in effect press joystick button number 1 in game. So let's see how this is set up. I have a macro called Super Cruise Engage. I can start this macro either by using this button or by saying the word engage. And when this these triggers are detected, it fires this macro, and it does a joystick button down 1, pauses 100 milliseconds, then brings it back up, and then also does a Y, which is mapped in my configuration to setting the throttle 100%. But you need to map these joystick buttons in-game as well. So if I go back to Options, Controls, here it is. And I'm just going to get rid of this mapping first of all. Now it's the same thing. You know, you can just map this, press a button on the keypad here, and is going to detect that, but it will be wrong. It wouldn't have actually gone through ControlMyJoystick. So we have voice commands to help you bind this. So if you go to Input, 3DX Where, here's the ones for binding the buttons. So when I say bind button, it's going to bind the currently selected button. So here I have Super Cruise. Click back on the game, unmute it, bind button. Okay, hyperspace jump, bind button, bind button. Now if you decide to use key mapping instead, it's a lot easier. And ControlMyJoystick version 3 really didn't have key mapping at all. It used these button mapping for mapping onto joystick buttons, and so you had to map all of these. But that was a bit of a pain. So now instead, you can in-game define a key mapping. So if I wanted, for example, a system map that is using the letter O in ControlMyJoystick. So that's a little bit easier because you don't have to bind that with any voice commands. So for example, system map here, let's go and take a closer look. I have it set to an O. So to bind this one, simple, you just press O on the keyboard. All right, let's take a look at how we do that automatic menu navigation. So I have it set up so that I can say, and I'm just going to go down to my trigger summary here, and this lists all the commands you have set up in the game. If I go down to request docking, if I say by voice, request docking, it's going to cause quite a large macro to fire. And so let's take a look at it. The macro name is request docking right here. Now it's large in that it sends 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 keystrokes to the game. So if I double click on this, you could see it sends a 1, E, space, S, space, Q, and then 1. And I'm just going to try it, although I'm not too sure if that'll work since I'm in the station. Request docking. So it opened up, first of all, the panel, which is number 1 in my configuration, and it might be different on yours. Then it used an E and an E. And a space. Then a down, which is an S. Then a space. But it sticks you back here. So what you need to do is add a couple of Qs and a 1 to close it. Because when we do this menu automation, the game can't tell us what part of the menu it's currently on. We need to assume that it's on a particular location. So we're going to assume it's on the first tab. So if you were in here and maybe poking around the different contacts or sub-targets or whatever, you're going to find, and you say leave it here on transactions. If you do the request docking again, it's going to go to the wrong tab and do the wrong thing, possibly causing something bad to occur. So when you're in these menus, always go back to the very first tab. That way you have a reliable starting point in case you run any macros. Something else that is pretty handy in this game is using the different axis curves. So for example, when I'm docking and when I said gear down, it automatically switched to this particular curve. And if I go gear down, you can see it says does L, which I think turns my landing light on, then a G to put my gear down, pauses 8 seconds, and then changes my curve. Because just when I'm about to touch down, I want the controller to be less sensitive, so I have a nice smooth touchdown. So what I can do here is, for this, normally a profile has one default axis curve, and you can modify that. You can also duplicate and rename these curves. So here I have one for docking, and if I go into my rotational axis, this is what it looks like. But if I go into my translational ones, you see how this is a pretty low curve? I'll go back to my normal one. So when I say gear up, it actually switches my axis curve back to normal, where I have a much sharper or stronger response curve whenever I use a translational X, translational Y, translational Z axis. So normally you would configure this to have maybe one for normal flight, one for docking, another one for combat perhaps, and maybe another one for mining. It really depends the type of gaming that you're doing with it, but it really just makes it a lot easier just to use the controller with no curve defined at all. It's too sensitive, it's too rough, it's just not feel right. So always set up a good curve for it. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can automate navigation. So let's first of all go into the Galaxy map. Galaxy map. I'll move ControlMyJoystick out of the way. So here I'm located on this place called Rakapila, and what I've done is because I have a trade route going on, I'm really just shuttling back and forth as I grind up some experience and some credits. And so I really only go to certain locations, and maybe after several weeks I'll change this to some different locations. But the key here is to bookmark the station at your destination. So if I was to go here I have this destination already set up, GES Orbital in the system Davana. Here I have one for Zon Enterprise in system Atata. And normally, once you have bookmarks set up, you would basically open the Galaxy screen. If you want to navigate somewhere, you go to the bookmark tab. You would find where you want to go. You click on plot route, and it plots it for you. Try this one. So let's see how we can automate that. I'm going to try having it automatically go to GES Orbital based on a voice command. So I'll close this. And I'll try a voice command. I have one set up right here. Here's a script for it. So I just need to say this. Go to GES Orbital. And you can see there, it opened the menu and moved the mouse around. It did some clicking to allow us to do this navigation. I'll try it again. Go to GES Orbital. So now we have quite a lengthy script for this. Basically what it does is it opens up the Galaxy map with the letter P, which is what I have it mapped to. Wait several seconds because it takes a while for that map to open. And the number of seconds you have to wait here is it will really vary on how fast your computer is and the graphic settings you have. Some might be faster, some might be slower. Then I move the mouse, and here we're going to move it to position 6000X and 8000Y. And this is an odd coordinate system here. This is not pixels at all. So it doesn't matter how many pixels your monitor has. 00 is in the upper left-hand corner, and 65,535, 65,535 is in the bottom right corner. Halfway in between, like dead center, right in here would be 32,768, 32,768. So you just need to find the right numbers here to be able to make this work. So what I normally do is I'll start off, and knowing that I have to go in the upper left-hand corner to click on the bookmarks icon here, I just estimate the number, and you just keep refining that until you find that it clicks on the target. So we open it, wait a little bit, move the mouse, and now once we're over that icon, we're going to put the left mouse button down, pause for 200 milliseconds, that's keeping the button down, and then we'll release the left mouse button. Wait half a second, move the mouse down to the GES orbital entry, click on it, left button down, wait 200 milliseconds, left button up, wait half a second, then move the mouse over to the right to the navigate, I think it's the navigate to menu item. You can see it moves a little further down to the right, wait half a second, left button down, 200 milliseconds, left button up, pause 200 milliseconds and press P again to close the galaxy map. So I'm just going to try that again. Now I also have a key on the controller to do this. And what I find is I use these buttons here. You can do any of these, but if I do like my top 3 destinations here, I have it set to save view 1, which is this. If I hold the button down for a little bit, like a second or two, it'll activate. So now if you wanted to make a second one, what you could do is you can go to this profile and duplicate it. So the next one is, in my list, is Atata at Zon Enterprise. Change the voice command. I'll change the button. I'll use that as number 2. Okay. So right now, if I was to run this script, it's going to do GES orbital again because I haven't changed the coordinates. So let's try it. If I press the 2 button, yeah, GES orbital. I want the one underneath that. So what I'm going to do is just modify the script. This one moves over to the icon. This one moves down to Atata. So I need more Z here. Let's try, say, 15,500. Just guessing, but it's down a little ways. And I'll click on the game and try it again. And that did it. So now it is set. So I'll try it again. And now we'll go back to the original one, which is the first button. That should be GES orbital. And maybe it's just me, but I find this menu navigation where you have to go deep in the menus in the game to be tedious, especially, if you're trying to level up and you're spending hours at it. I much prefer a voice command or just pressing a button to take care of all of that navigation. Now, depending on how fast your computer is, you could speed this up a little bit. You probably would have to leave the button down at 200 milliseconds, but moving between stages like this pause, you can maybe make that 200 milliseconds. Go to GES orbital. So there you have it. That's how you set up Elite Dangerous for Control My Joystick. Have fun.